Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. This is the story's second episode, in which Iruka takes Mizuki's shuriken to the back instead of Naruto. Naruto loses control and prepares to unleash the QB, but he is stopped by the hand of his hero before he can tear off the seal. Yondame's Hokage. To show your support, like and subscribe. Let's get this show going. The Sannin shifted into a sitting position as he continued to watch the spectacle in the clearing below him. From his treetop vantage hadn't been able to keep himself away. Just like with his previous students, the boy had captured his attention and just wouldn't let go. Being Naruto's godfather, the Sannin was privy to information of the blonde's training. As such, he knew that Sarutobi had no concrete plan for the taijutsu style Naruto was currently coming up with. He had simply instructed Uegawa equip him with the basics, and perhaps a little inspiration, and let the creative boy run with it. And even Jiraiya had to admit, the boy had utilized his inventiveness and taken to creating a brand new style like a duck to water. He had learnt the basics, using his cage bunshine to a fairly advanced level, as well as the academy style. And while most people would attempt to combine these into rigid kata and combinations, the child had taken a completely different approach. Instead, he was using what he knew to create more of a fighting philosophy, a manner of combat that could be molded and adapted, one that could evolve with the shinobi learning it. This was in fact, how all of the true shinobi taijutsu styles had come into being. Styles such as the Goken focus on speed, and physical superiority, mastery of one's own body in order to master your opponent. Whereas his sensei's style, the Saruken, revolved around using the terrain to your advantage, in order to strike the enemy from unexpected angles or from outside their field of vision. This is what Naruto had done instinctively. His fighting philosophy appeared to revolve around keeping the enemy off balance, and never maintaining a rigid pattern of attacks, thus preventing the enemy from predicting your next move. This approach was supplemented by his obvious talent with the cage bunshine technique, using the bunshine to work in tandem with himself to constantly keep the enemy fending off attacks from multiple directions, and often at the same time. This prevented them from gaining any kind of foothold in the fight. Of course, the obvious advantages is relative to the abilities of the enemy, which is where ninjutsu and other techniques and strategies came into play. This is where approaching taijutsu as a philosophy, rather than a rigid doctrine, was essential for a shinobi. It allows the shinobi to seamlessly weave other techniques into their combat. That Naruto was approaching his training from this angle was highly impressive, and spoke a lot for natural disposition towards the shinobi arts, despite the fact that he obviously lacked the natural talent of Sei, an Uchiha. This is where Naruto mirrored his father. They were both as talentless as they came, but both were so driven and determined that their work rate made up for the slow learning curve. And that was the problem. He was far too much like the Sannin's old student. Even now, he couldn't help but be reminded of watching his own student train, doggedly practicing and improving until they had achieved what they had set out to. He was here out of some kind of perverse and masochistic curiosity. He knew the grief that he would face every time he laid eyes upon his godson. But he kept coming back, kept checking up on the boy every time he was in the village. And over the years, the grief had morphed into something far, far more unbearable. Guilt. Unfathomable guilt. He knew damned well he could have improved the boy's life, helped him escape his loneliness. But he hadn't, out of pure selfishness and cowardice. And now, he wasn't sure if any relationship with Naruto would be salvageable. How could the boy forgive him? He sighed as he watched the boy switch the focus of his training, and 10 identical figures worked through several hand seals, and all at once intone the name of a fairly basic lightning technique. The results were mixed, but the boy hadn't used enough chakra, and only managed to channel the technique through his hand instead of extending it from his hand, an obvious sign of his advancement in chakra control. However, Naruto hadn't thought about it like that. Frustration evident, he and his clones had repeated the technique several times, and each time increased the amount of chakra. Finally Naruto had grown impatient, and channeled far more chakra than he should have done. Shit. The Sannin was in motion before he realized it. Naruto had totally overloaded his technique completely, resulting in a rather impressive explosion, flinging Naruto backwards, towards the forest behind the clearing he had been using for training. Fortunately, Jiraiya was deceptively fast, considering his age, and managed to catch Naruto before he struck the tree, thus preventing any serious damage. Damn, old man. You are fast. Jiraiya froze in place. The kid should have been knocked out cold for that. He hadn't intended to actually still be around when he came to. His gaze fell to the boy he was still holding in his arms, and observed the obviously impressed expression on his face. He placed the kid down so he could stand and faked a smug grin. Yeah, well, when you're the magnificent Dode Sage of Mount Myaboku, Such acts of incredible heroism come as naturally as simply breathing. Sure, he was laying it on thick, even for him, but it should annoy the kid so much he could leave without his thoughts were interrupted by a loud snort from the boy in front of him. Whatever, you're still an old man. Oh really? I bet I could teach a thing or two about the jutsu you were working on. After all, a shinobi of my obvious caliber must be well versed in ninjutsu. He had spoken without thinking. A habit that had long since been beaten out of him by Sarutobi. He hadn't been able to help himself. Naruto had just coaxed him into it. Really? You could really help me out? He exuded enthusiasm as he spoke, echoing memories of a certain other blonde jutsu enthusiast, many years before. Yet strangely he was not hit by the grief of losing his last student. He knew, should he actually decide to help the kid out, that once he found out how Jiraiya had left him during his childhood, he would not want to see him again. But Jiraiya still felt compelled to help the kid. He owed him that much for one. Jiraiya also held techniques that were his by birthright. But there was another reason. Rather than add to the loss that had niggled away at him since his student's passing as he had expected, just interacting with him had lessened it. Almost as if a weight was slowly being lifted off his shoulders, simply by being around the blonde in front of him. Lastly, he found that the boy's enthusiasm is completely infectious. He turned towards Naruto who was staring up at him eagerly awaiting a response. A grin spread across the Sanin's face. So, you want to learn just to? Naruto panted as he raced through the seals for Raiden, Kaminari Muchi for what was possibly the 1000th time. He had to admit, Jiraiya knew his jutsu. The old man's demonstration of the technique had been incredible. He had flashed through the seals at almost inhuman speeds, before releasing the technique on both hands, launching 2 crackling whips of lightning chakra at a pair of trees, and using the technique to physically tear the tree down. He brought his own hand to bear on another tree, sending it towards his target, and used it to strike his target, gauging out a rather large chunk of the tree. Pretty good. You've gained enough control of the chakra to effectively use it as a whip. The next step would be to learn to use it to wrap round a target. However, that can wait for a while. I need to talk to you. Naruto looked at the man before him, his face contorted into what was nearly a grimace. Of course, Naruto had figured out who the man was the moment he had laid eyes upon him. His studies to catch up had inadvertently covered the 3 Sannin, and how the sage Jiraiya had tutored the 4th. He had gone to ask the old man to ask what had happened to the man who might be able to tell him more about his father. It was there that he had learned that Jiraiya was his godfather, and his reasons for not staying within Konoha. At first Naruto had been furious. But, as he calmed down, he found he could, at least a little, understand how Jiraiya felt. The Hokage had then gone on to explain how important the man was to the village's spy network and ability to stay ahead of any threats, and how such a job would have meant Naruto wouldn't have been much better off. And Naruto could definitely understand that. Jiraiya had to put the village first no matter what, and for that Naruto couldn't help respect him, if only a little. And it was because of this, Naruto decided that if he were ever to meet Jiraiya, he would give the man a chance to make up for lost time. And as far as Naruto could see, that was what the man was trying to do. Jiraiya took a deep breath as he finished his speech to Naruto. He had started from the beginning, and told him absolutely everything. He was his father's sensei, his godfather, absolutely everything. All the way through, Naruto had sat fairly calmly, not once showing any sign of the reaction that he was certain that he was going to receive. Instead, Naruto just sat in front of him with a smile on his face. His confusion was turning into worry. He had no idea what this meant. He just couldn't read what the kid was thinking. That is, until Naruto spoke. You're here now though, right? You're trying to make up for it now, aren't you? The Sannin was floored. He couldn't quite formulate a reaction. Listen, I guess what I'm trying to say is I forgive you. Yeah, I was lonely growing up, and you probably could have changed that. But I have people I consider precious now, and my life has changed because of it. I guess I could try and stay angry with you, but what would be the point? That would just mean throwing away the possibility of gaining another friend, and probably the last living link to my father. Naruto took a breath, before breaking out into his trademark grin. But that doesn't mean you're not gonna have to do at least a little bit of work. I mean, I bet an awesome ninja like you would have at least a little bit to show someone like me. That was when it clicked in the Sannin's mind. He already knew. Sensei set me up. He glanced over at Naruto who had gotten back up, and had resumed practicing his taijutsu with a group of shadow clones. He had been given a second chance. Jiraiya couldn't help but smile to match his godson. That doesn't mean the old goat won't pay for setting me up like this. He couldn't help but think about the kid's ambition to be Hokage. Jiraiya, The man who trained 2 Hokages. Now I bet that would impress the ladies. Naruto fidgeted listlessly in his seat, as Iruka-sensei continued to read out the team assignments. He didn't even know why he had to be here. He already knew that he wouldn't be assigned a proper team, as he was going to be apprenticed to Jiraiya. But the old pervert had insisted that he show up at the academy. Naruto suppressed a scowl as he thought about his new sensei's eccentricities. All things considered, Jiraiya had managed to keep his habits fairly low-key, but apparently even a Sannin can't maintain self-control for more than a few days. He had been practicing one of the jutsu his clones had uncovered in the library, Fuuten, Guko, and had just about figured out the amount of chakra he should be using to avoid the jutsu blowing up in his own face. This had actually happened, more than once, much to Jiraiya's amusement, when the Sannin declared that he needed to go some research, and that he wouldn't be too far away if Naruto needed him. He had just assumed the pervert was working on a new jutsu or technique that he needed to keep secret, and so continued to train. Several hours passed, and Naruto decided that he should go find the Sannin, to show his progress. Fortunately, he wasn't particularly difficult to find, as he seemed to be giggling at something fairly loudly, from behind a bush. He was spying on women, who were swimming in the river that the hill that they had been training on overlooked. Needless to say, the man got a full-strength Oiroku no Jutsu, which subsequently sent the man over the edge of the cliff, into the midst of the very women he had been spying on. They had heard Naruto scream pervert, and once they laid eyes on Jiraiya, they connected the dots. The sound of the resultant beating was thoroughly satisfying. Simultaneously, Jiraiya gained a new name. Aruzenin. Naruto perked up slightly when he heard Iruka call Sakura's name. Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, and Shimura Sai, your Team 7. Just as Iruka finished speaking, the classroom door opened revealing a boy no older than Naruto. I am Shimura Sai, I apologize for being late. The boy immediately put Naruto on guard. Something wasn't right with him. He wore a short, black jacket that exposed his stomach, and the tanto strapped to his back immediately set him apart from the rest of his class as someone who had more than basic shinobi training. But it wasn't that bothered Naruto. It was the boy's smile. It was painfully forced, and hadn't left his face since he had entered the room. He filled Naruto with unease as he took the seat next Sakura, the seat that he had foregone in order to avoid a beating that said girl would have given out all too easily if he hadn't budged. He himself had taken a seat at the back row, next to Hinata, a girl whom Naruto had never actually spoken to himself, mainly because she had always kept herself to herself and never really drawn his attention, or anyone else's for that matter. He quickly decided that he should change that, and now was as good a time as any. And besides that, he wanted a second opinion on that Sai kid. Hey Hinata, do you notice anything weird about Sai? He whispered, as the hubbub following the announcement continued. Naruto couldn't help be curious as Hinata stiffened as he spoke, and barely met his eyes as she stuttered out a response. His smile, it doesn't seem natural, like she was cut off by Iruka announcing the next team, over the noise of the class. Inuzuka Kiba, Aburame Shino, and Hyuga Hinata, you are in Team 8. Unlucky Hinata, you have dog breath on your team, he murmured, trying to ensure Kiba didn't overhear his joke, but then had to repress his own laugh when Hinata's hand shot to her mouth, in order to stifle a giggle at the expense of her new teammate. The academy curriculum actually contained an extensive section on the reading of body language, and using that information to your advantage. Naruto had long since covered the entire academy curriculum using his shadow clones, and as such, could tell Hinata was horrifically nervous. She was pushing her fingers together, and refusing to lift her gaze from the desk in front of her. Unfortunately, even with his newfound knowledge about body language, he still couldn't figure out exactly why she was so nervous. She could just be shy, Naruto supposed. But no one is that shy, are they? Eventually, Iruka reached Naruto's name last, just in time to stop the whispers of how he didn't get a team. Because after all, who would want the dead last? And Uzumaki Naruto has been personally chosen as an apprentice to Jiraiya of the Sannin. It was hard to miss the pride in Iruka's voice, despite the fact he wasn't supposed to show any favoritism. And whilst that made Naruto happy, it wasn't nearly as happy as the shocked silence that had graced the room at Iruka's announcement made him. Actually, it was less the shocked silence, and more the fact that the shocked silence made the sound of Sasuke grinding his teeth out of what Naruto perceived as jealousy, carry around the room. Priceless. He says you are to meet him at your usual training area, at 10:30 a.m. sharp. Naruto checked the clock in the corner of the room. 10:25. So not only was the pervert too lazy to actually come and meet me, he's going to make me run. Someone is just begging to be pranked. Naruto exited the academy at a run, determined to get to Jiraiya before his time ran out. If he was late, Jiraiya would probably spend at least an hour refusing to train him, whilst he did his research, as punishment. However, before he could increase his pace, a piercing scream broke the placid silence outside of the academy building. Naruto stopped in his tracks. He knew there would be other ninja that would have heard it, most of them Chunin or Jonin. But what if they didn't make it in time? It didn't take Naruto any more than a second to make the decision, before he set off towards the scream. It didn't take long for Naruto to discover the reason for the scream. He spotted the shinobi first, darting from rooftop to rooftop, at an impressive speed, heading towards Konoha's south gate. It took a little longer, to figure out the reason for the scream. A small girl, no older than 5, was slung over the shinobi's shoulder, her blonde hair billowing out behind them as they moved. Naruto immediately set after them, making his way to the rooftops of the village. Unfortunately, this alerted the mysterious shinobi to his presence, and he turned his head to meet Naruto's eyes, and the blonde couldn't help but notice his Hokage. He was an Iwa shinobi. An Iwa shinobi was kidnapping a child in Konoha. However, this revelation brought Naruto more questions than answers, such as, where the hell were the Anbu? This momentary distraction was all it took. The blonde almost didn't see it. An explosive note, placed just where Naruto was about to land. The newly instated Jinan was working on instinct at this point, and the 2 telltale pops that signaled the arrival of a pair of Kage Bunshine told Naruto that his training of the technique with Yuagao had paid off. And as Naruto felt the Bunshine's hands grasp his jacket, he could only pray that he had made it time. The mysterious, black-clad ninja glanced back, to see if his trap had ensnared his pursuer, and couldn't help but be impressed with what he saw. The kid had summoned 2 Kage Bunshine, without seals in mid-jump. The first was used to give the second leverage, and the second pulled the brat out of the way of the explosion, and the boy had instantly moved to go after him again. Looks as if I'm going to have to teach a lesson. The ninja's eyes were drawn to a park area, that was, like much of Konoha, forested, a few houses past his current location. That's as good a place as any. The Iwa ninja descended to ground level amongst the trees, and awaited his prey. Naruto looked down to the wooded area in which the Iwa ninja had retreated into. Why would he try to hide in there, rather than move straight to the gates? Unless, he's trying to shake me. But something still doesn't add up. Where the hell are the Anbu for a start? And why didn't anybody else hear that explosion? Naruto ground his teeth together. None of this made any sense, but any answers he could figure out here were meaningless unless he saved that girl. So, he's using the trees for cover, and going on what I saw earlier, he's pretty awesome at setting traps as he runs. Fine, I guess I'll have to play this one safe. As he spoke, 2 Kage Bunshine burst into existence alongside him, and set off into the forest, directly following the trail left by the shinobi, one leading the way and another hanging back slightly. The real Naruto followed the pair at a distance, staying just out the pair's eyeshot, meaning he would be out of sight should they come across the shinobi. It wasn't long before the merit of taking a few seconds to think and strategize before acting became all too apparent, and all of a sudden he was incredibly grateful for all the extra reading he had done once he had finished with Academy. And especially grateful towards that weird Jonin that had advised him to do it. Flashback, Raiten, Kaminari Muchi. The lightning crackled off of his hand in a way that was almost natural to him after 2 weeks of trying to master the technique. And despite the sweat exuding from just about every pore on his body, the heavy panting and the slightly lopsided way he was carrying himself, signaling the onset of exhaustion, he couldn't help feeling slightly smug, as the tree he had targeting let loose an almighty groan before toppling to the ground, causing a large tremor to reverberate around the clearing that he and Jiraiya had been using for a training ground. And for once, he found himself missing the presence of the self-proclaimed super pervert, so that he could admire his handiwork. That's not bad, you know, you still haven't quite nailed the control, but that will come with time, I suppose. Naruto stiffened and began to frantically search for the source of the unfamiliar voice, and his eyes very quickly settled on a man, leaning against a tree nonchalantly reading an orange book that was suspiciously familiar. And whilst his face was masked, the Konoha Hokage that was tied around his face, covering his left eye, marked him out as an ally. Who are you? And how come you're here? Naruto questioned, his exhaustion temporarily overshadowed by his curiosity. The man in question straightened, and placed his book into the kunai holster at his waist. My name is Hitake Kakashi, and I am the Jonin sensei who was due to take you onto my team, before Jiraiya-sama agreed to make you his apprentice. Oh right. But that still doesn't explain why you're here though. I mean, I don't want to be rude or anything, but this is a little bit far to come, just to say that," the blonde stated, throwing the Jonin a confused look. Kakashi's eye curved, creating what Naruto surmised was a smile. "Ah, not as slow as you look then, eh?" Kakashi asked, causing anger to flare up in the Jonin in front of him, much to his own amusement. However, he continued, as though oblivious to the rage he had generated in Naruto. "Well, you're right. I came out here to have a quick talk with you, before I begin preparations for my own Jonin team." Kakashi sighed through his mask, his eye losing the smile it had before. "I was the student of the Yondaime, your father. And, as a result of the council's mistrust, the masked shinobi's voice had begun to fill with venom as he spoke, forcing him to strain to regain his composure. Due to the QB, I was forbidden to make contact with you, outside of my shinobi duties." Naruto didn't quite know how to react. He was both angry and sad, that another person that could have made his early childhood just a little bit less lonely, hadn't been there. But he also understood what it was to be a shinobi, and that Kakashi hadn't been given a choice. Instead, he felt anger towards the council, a group of people who, according to the Sandaime, and more recently Jiraiya, had done everything possible to make his life a misery. "So Sandaime-sama decided that he would appoint you to my Jonin team once you graduated." Naruto finally understood now. The man had wanted to make amends by teaching him, and now it must be like the chance was being taken away from him. "But now Jiraiya-sama is your sensei, I can't help you directly, without being accused of trying to poach a student." Suddenly, the man's weird eye smile returned. "However, if I were to stumble upon a rookie Jonin, such as yourself, and offer him or her advice, then that would be part of my duty as an elite Jonin and superior, no? And if I were to say, drop a scroll, completely by accident as I leave, then that surely couldn't be breaking any rules, right?" Kakashi allowed a scroll to drop behind him, hitting the ground with a soft thud as he spoke. "Anyway, I'm a little late for a meeting, so I should probably go. But before I do, perhaps I should suggest you carry on with all that reading you have been doing. In fact, I would probably go so far as to suggest that you pay particular attention to battlefield tactics and strategies. As you are in an apprenticeship, the tactical theory is entirely different from that of a foreman cell, and it would be more than likely that you will have to do a few missions solo, too. But as I said, it's just a suggestion." And with that, the man disappeared in a puff of smoke, signifying a sunshine technique, leaving behind a scroll with a note attached. "This is one of my personal favorites, and I'm sure you'll figure out a use for it. Enjoy." Naruto eagerly opened the scroll, and let out a cry of joy with what he found. Flashback end. Naruto grimaced as he received a first-person view of his first Kage Bunshine's fate. It had got its foot caught in a concealed rope that had tightened around its leg, and as it was yanked into the air upside down, it managed to catch sight of the handful of kunai that had been let loose in its direction as the trap activated, before they plunged into its flesh, dispelling it. Meanwhile, the second Bunshine involuntarily gulped, as it fulfilled its duty of summoning the replacement. "Glad that's not my job." Naruto and his Bunshine pushed on in a similar fashion, until eventually, the leading Bunshine signaled to the one behind him to stop, before dispelling itself. The original Naruto grinned slightly as the memory of spotting the Iwa shinobi setting up the next trap a few meters ahead of his first clone's position. He circled around the area, giving the enemy a fairly wide berth, to try and get behind the ninja. As he was doing this, his remaining clone played its part. "Hey asshole!" The Bunshine screeched at the Iwanin, as it lamped down from the trees into the area where the shinobi was setting up his latest trap. "Hand over that girl, before I kick your ass." The foreign ninja let out a short bark of a laugh. "Why don't you come over here and make me, you little shit?" He had barely finished speaking before the Bunshine charged at him, his fist cocked back for a punch. "A head-on charge? What the fuck do they teach in this village?" Upon hearing this, the charging Naruto grinned, and the Iwa shinobi widened his eyes as he heard two Bunshine appear, and turned his head just in time to see them running at him from behind, taking advantage of the distraction caused by the first. Working purely on instinct, he spun and ducked the blow of the first, and extended his right-left leg as he spun, catching the second clone in an improvised sweep. Before the first clone could regain his balance, he straightened and chambered a kick to destroy the second. Raiten, Kaminari Muchi. He felt the Raiten chakra whip tighten around the leg he was just about to use, numbing his leg slightly and pulling him off balance, only for the Bunshine he was about to destroy land its own kick to his stomach, sending him sprawling to the ground. However, this also disconnected the Raiten technique that had connected to his leg. He threw a glance to his captive, who was still unconscious, leaned up against a tree just outside of the current area of the battle, before returning his eyes to the opponents before him. The one who had landed the kick on him, was watching him warily, ready to react to his next move. However, the one who had used the ninjutsu was breathing heavily, and just as he was trying to figure out why he was so tired, he exploded in a puff of smoke. That one was a Kage Bunshin too? And I watched the other one be created, so that means the real one isn't here. Doton, Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. The Iwa Shinobi cursed as he felt Naruto's hands grasp his ankles, and once again only instinct and experience saved him from the jutsu. He performed a Kawarimi no Jutsu just as the blonde began to pull him underground, replacing himself with a section of a branch from one of the trees above. He raced through hand seals, whilst below the real Naruto leapt out from the hole created by his jutsu. Kaden, Gukakyu no Jutsu. Naruto's eyes were drawn up, and they widened as he caught sight of the size of the fireball that was coming his way. Shit. That thing is way bigger than the one I saw Sasuke practicing during the academy. I have to move, but I don't have the time. Raiten, Kaminari Muchi. Naruto felt the feeling of his own lightning chakra wrap around his leg, as his remaining clone used the jutsu to yank him out of the path of the fireball, which in turn expended the last of its own chakra, thereby dispelling it. He had barely landed when his gut told him to move once more. He rolled sideways, dodging the incoming knee of the Iwa Shinobi. The enemy ninja launched himself at Naruto once again, raining down attacks at the fresh Shanan, only to be forced to leap over a leg sweep from a fresh Bunshin that had seemingly materialized from nowhere. Suddenly, the enemy ninja was on the back foot, being forced to defend against relentless attacks from all directions. No sooner had he blocked a punch from the original, the Bunshin was attacking from behind, forcing him to angle his body sideways to deal with both threats at once. He stepped over a leg sweep aimed at his left leg from the Bunshin, and used the motion to flow into a kick at the Bunshin. The original hadn't reacted fast enough to the clone's initial strike, leaving the Iwa Nin with an opportunity to counter. He lashed out at the Bunshin, destroying it with a well-placed kick to the side of the Bunshin's head. Unfortunately, the sound of the Bunshin being destroyed masked the sound of the creation of two more. Fyuten, Gukuo no Jutsu. Fyuten, Gukuo no Jutsu. The two clones announced their jutsu in perfect unison, each launching a barrage of tight spheres of deadly wind towards the enemy ninja, each impacting his torso and tearing into his uniform and skin underneath. The ninja was sent barreling backwards, skidding across the mud, before impacting the base of a tree. The original Naruto looked on as the ninja shakily stood up, and made for the unconscious girl, attempting to escape the scene of the battle. He signaled to his clones, who both used their Raiden jutsu to pull the Iwa Nin to the ground, preventing him from reaching the girl. The Iwa Nin began racing through hand seals on the ground, too quickly for Naruto to stop him. Time for the backup plan. If I cannot capture the target, destroy it, so it can never be used against us. Kaden, Gukakyu no Jutsu. Naruto watched in horror as the ball of flame erupted from the shinobi's mouth, ready to incinerate the child he had been fighting to protect. There was no way he could stop it. Was there? Naruto took a deep breath. He had promised he would make his father proud, and even if this was to be his last and only chance. Uzumaki Naruto never goes back on a promise. And there was no way he would let this girl die, regardless of the cost. Kawarimi no Jutsu. Naruto intoned the words for the jutsu not in the adrenaline-charged shout that many ninja use during a life-and-death battle, but in a calm voice that seemed to settle his own mind. And as he felt the pull of the technique end, indicating he had successfully swapped with the girl, he opened his eyes to face his fate head-on. Doton, Torakugeshi. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as a large stone wall erupted in front of him, stopping the fireball in its tracks. As usual, the gallant Jiraiya comes to the rescue in the nick of time, and saves his new student from the clutches of death. The blonde turned his head to where the small girl had been moments before, and turned his head back to see the stone wall crumbling to reveal a very different man to the one had been fighting earlier. This one was taller for a start, and wore a Jonin flak jacket, as well as a Konoha Hitayate. Immediately, something clicked in Naruto's brain. What the hell is going on here? He shouted, as he watched both men grin at him, even as the tall Jonin began to light a cigarette. What is going on? Is that you just passed the Jonin test, Gaki? Jiraiya stated, his face not losing the smug grin it was wearing. Test? At this Jiraiya sighed impatiently, and rolled his eyes. Well, didn't you wonder where all the Anbu were? Or that if the kidnapped girl was so important, why no one was looking for her? This was a test designed by myself and Sarutobi Asuma over here, in order to see if you were ready to become a Jonin, or more specifically a Konoha Jonin. This appeared to confuse the blonde even more. But I thought I had already graduated after the Mizuki incident? And what about the girl and the Iwa ninja? I still don't get what's going on. Jiraiya pinched the bridge of his nose. Sure, he knew that the kid was still trying to shake off the adrenaline of a battle and all that, but it was really frustrating to have to explain it all. Yes, you graduated, but before you officially become a Genin, each individual sensei puts their squad under a test of their own design in order to judge whether the potential Genin have the qualities that they want from Shinobi under command. Hatake Kakashi, one of Konoha's more proficient Jonin, puts his students through a test designed to test their teamwork. As I am taking you as an apprentice, teamwork, whilst still important, is not a priority, so I tested you for different qualities. Seeing that the blonde was still giving him his full attention, Jiraiya continued. First of all, I tested you to make sure everything that you've learned in these past weeks has actually stuck around in that thick skull of yours. We intentionally forced you into situations where you would have to use the skills you have learned, such as the trees laced with traps. But more importantly, I tested you to make sure that you had the thing that gives all of Konoha's greatest ninja their strength. The will of fire. Naruto once again looked confused. What's the will of fire? I haven't heard of it before? What do you mean it gives Konoha ninja their strength? This time it was Asuma who stepped forward to speak. The will of fire is the phrase we use to describe the spirit that drives Konoha ninja to fight. It's the desire to protect what is precious to you, and the extra strength that desire grants you when that precious something is put at risk. For us Konoha shinobi, it is the village and its people that we strive to protect above all else. For some, like me in fact, it takes a while to realize and understand what it is that you as a ninja fight for. And for others, it is instinctual. People like your father and the rest of the previous Hokages, are those kind of people. They understand on a base level that they would put their life on the line for what they consider precious. Whether that means loved ones, friends, the village, or the people that live within its walls. Asuma paused as he stepped on the finished cigarette, that he had let fall onto the ground. And I have to say that today, you proved that you understand the will of fire perfectly, even if you didn't realize it at first. When you performed the Kawarimi with the child, you did not hesitate. You simply knew that you had to save her no matter the cost. That is the will of fire. Jiraiya grinned as the understanding dawned on Naruto's face. Anyway, Gaki, if you still haven't figured it out yet, the little girl was me henged. And Asuma was the Iwa nin you fought, also in a henge. But how did you maintain the jutsu as we fought? Surely the hits you took should have dispelled it? He had aimed the question at Asuma, but it was Jiraiya who answered. That would be because of these. The Sannin stated, pulling on a slip of paper from his jacket. They are seals of that eye that store chakra, and pump it into an already active henge technique to smooth over and disruptions in the henge. Naruto still looked lost, despite the fact he was nodding his head, causing Jiraiya to have to fight back another sigh. Listen, you understand that a henge is a basic genjutsu, right? And that when I land a hit on someone, it disrupts the chakra being pushed into the henge to keep it active, cutting it off from power and as a result, dispelling it? This time Naruto nodded far more surely, showing his understanding. While these seals essentially act as a backup generator for the jutsu, giving a chakra to replace the user as the source, meaning it cannot be dispelled by taking a few hits. Could they be used for other jutsu, like a bunshin? The question had caught Jiraiya unawares. He had genuinely never thought of that. Possibly, but I'd have to revamp the seal. Why? Just curious, it sounds like it could be really useful when used in combination with the cage bunshin, is all. Will you teach me how to use seals? Jiraiya's grin grew at this. Of course, Gaki. But only when you're ready. But first, we need to get some food down you. We have a busy day ahead of you still, so you'll need the strength. Naruto cocked his head to the side in confusion. Busy day? Of course. We still have to train a little bit, and we will start taking missions today as well. But first, we are going shopping. I will not have an apprentice of mine running around in bright orange. Naruto just looked oblivious. But what's wrong with orange? Naruto looked himself over in the mirror for nearly the third time. Even he had to admit, he looked pretty badass. He wore the standard black Konoha combats, tied off at the ankles to prevent loose fabric becoming a hindrance. Upon each thigh he wore a kunai pouch, in order to exploit the fact that he was ambidextrous, a trait even he hadn't realized, until Jiraiya had spotted that he didn't seem to favor any particular side when fighting. Upon the insistence of his sensei, he also wore a third, this one larger than the others, and with more compartments within, strapped to his belt slightly behind him. Jiraiya still hadn't explained to him what it was for, merely that he was confident that Naruto would enjoy using what it was designed to contain. Replacing his old jacket, He instead had a plain black shirt with full-length sleeves, over a mesh shirt for added protection. The shirt, whilst being full-length, had been tied up from his wrists, all the way up to his elbow with bandages. Even with the function of preventing loose fabric, this was still incredibly unusual, and once again Naruto couldn't figure out for the life of him why he required it. Only that Erozenin had insisted upon it. Finally, was the pièce de resistance of his new uniform, or at least in his opinion. Jiraiya had asked him if he wanted any additional body armor, and initially he had said no and they were all set to purchase a plain jacket instead, when something caught his eye. In the far corner of the shop, almost completely hidden by racks of generic Shinobi attire, was a mannequin. Naruto couldn't help but wander over to it, to get a closer look. It wasn't particularly flashy, or eye-catching. But to Naruto, it just screamed awesome. Upon the mannequin was a set of Shinobi body armor, made to be lightweight and maneuverable, whilst still providing protection from all but the heaviest of blows, and the deadliest of ninjutsu. It provided a more complete form of protection from the basic Anbu garb, although looking fairly similar. Unlike the Anbu uniform, it provided full protection of the shoulders and the sides of the torso. Where it seriously differed however was the mechanism. The Anbu uniform was two pieces of material strapped over the shoulders and at the hips, sacrificing protection for speed and maneuverability. However, the armor in front of him was constructed from multiple interlocking plates of material, allowing maximum movement, with no gaps in the armor as the cost. These plates were concealed underneath a top layer of deep mauve material, in order to disguise the mechanism. Meaning that, at first glance, the armor was restrictive, ideally meaning that any potential enemy would underestimate DHW wearer's speed and agility, giving him the edge. The armor also had several attachments woven into the top layer of fabric, including straps where a scabbard could be attached both across the back and at hip level, and places where scrolls could be attached. Now, that is interesting. Naruto turned to find his sensei, looking curiously at the armor. These front panels of armor have specially designed sections in which seals can be woven into. But at the academy teaches that seals can be placed on most kinds of material? Jiraiya nodded in the affirmative, before replying. True enough. However, Shinobi armor is woven together using material infused with chakra by the person who created it. This means that seals cannot be placed on someone wearing the armor, without having to make changes to the seal array to make it compatible with the individual chakra of the person who made the armor. As you can tell, this would be almost impossible in a practical combat situation. The Sannin reached out a hand, and began examining the armor closely. However, this armor is designed to fuse with the user's chakra once a seal on the inside is activated. This enables the owner to place seals on his own armor in order to aid him in battle, whilst bypassing the seal defense put in place by the person who made it, leaving the defense active, in order to protect him from the use of seals by the enemy. A little known fact is that my old armor, and the Yondame's Jonin flak jacket are made in the same way, as we both used seals extensively. That had settled it for Naruto. For him, it was another link to his father. Another link to his family. That, and it looked completely awesome. Sarutobi found that despite the presence of several of his subordinates, many of them and really quite senior in posture, that he couldn't keep the proud smile that he currently wore, buried under his need to be professional and impartial towards all of his shinobi. He also found that neither Iruka nor Jiraiya could either. Naruto stood before him, sporting a slightly sheepish grin, in completely new shinobi attire, looking every bit the professional shinobi. "I take that you are here for your first mission, Naruto?" the Hokage inquired, garnering an excited nod from the blonde in front of him. "Excellent news. Iruka over here has your assignment ready for you." The Hokage gestured to Iruka, who was unable to hold back a grimace as he extended the mission scroll towards the fresh Shinon. Sarutobi sat back in his chair, and awaited the fireworks. "I have to deliver groceries? What the he?" Naruto's tirade was cut short as his sensei grabbed him by the mouth with one arm, gesturing to the elderly Kage with the other. "I think I'll explain the merits of drugs to him, Sarutobi-sensei." "Save your ears the trouble," Jiraiya stated, before hastily exiting the mission room with a still struggling, and evidently outraged Naruto under his arm. As they left, the room's occupants burst into laughter. In truth, they had been waiting for the blonde to turn up all day. To most in the room, although they had no animosity towards Naruto, in fact some were rather fond of the Shinon, the mission assignments was but a small vindication for the many pranks the blonde had pulled over the years. "What the hell kind of mission is this, Erozenin? Deliver groceries? This isn't a mission, it's a chore." Jiraiya sighed heavily, already having anticipated his apprentice's reaction to. For a start, The reaction of his first apprentice had been exactly the same. Drank missions are an exercise used in order to promote the growth of teamwork, before you actually set out into the field. They give Jinan an insight into how their teammates think, and what kind of people they are. Without this prior bonding, sending Jinan into a combat situation would be utter suicide. Jiraiya paused to check his students' understanding before continuing. However, as I'm sure you're aware, you are not part of any team, and whilst you will be participating in joint missions with other teams, you will be doing a great many of these dranks yourself, as well as while working with one of the other Jinan teams. But why do I have to do them by myself as well? Jiraiya grinned at his student's question. We will be using them as a training exercise. One of the clever things about how the drank missions are set up, is that they all simulate a higher ranked mission. For example, you are being asked to deliver groceries, correct? Well, when we do this, you will take this to mean that you will be leading a mission, in which you and your team are to deliver valuable intel or cargo to a location, whilst protecting the cargo from external threats. Understand? Naruto thought for a few seconds before answering. You said that I would be leading a team. If I'm doing these missions independently, who will be my team? And how can there be any external threats for me to protect the cargo from? Naruto asked, his curiosity genuinely growing. You'll be using Kage Bunshin to simulate ninja under your command, and yours truly will act as the external threats. It's your job to command your ninja effectively, in order to complete the mission without sustaining any casualties amongst your subordinates. I want you to understand, that I'm not training you to be just another powerful shinobi. I'm training you to be a leader. Someone who can lead a unit deep into enemy territory, on what most would consider a suicide mission, and return with everyone alive. You have to understand how to command shinobi effectively, and whilst minimizing harm to your ninja. As Hokage, you will have to do this constantly. And often you can't be there to protect the ninja you have sent. As a result, your orders have to be spot on, or you will have an ally's blood on your hands. A friend's blood on your hands. Naruto scanned the trees around him intently for signs of his enemy. Once they had collected the groceries he was supposed to deliver, Jiraiya had given him a map, planning his route for him. It had been explained that he would be allowed to plan his route for some missions, Jiraiya would do it for others in order to simulate occasions where only one route is available to him, and him and his team would have to take it, regardless of the danger. Typically, his sensei had given him the longest route through the village to his destination, cutting through many rarely used alleys and areas of park, each and every one a perfect location for an ambush. He returned his eyes to the Kage Bunshin convey he had ordered ahead of him. He was at place the back, to enable him, in theory, to observe and react to the events that unfolded around him, hopefully giving the orders in time to save the lives of his comrades as well as ensure the success of the mission. That was another condition that Jiraiya had laid out prior to beginning. His clones were only allowed to take action based on his orders, and were not allowed to act independently in any other capacity than self-defense. He had set his first clone at the front of the convoy, in order to act both as a scout and in order to initially engage with any threats. 2 more were at the rear, enabling them to support and defend any threats to either the convey, or the first Kage Bunshin. The cargo itself was being carried by a separate Bunshin, hinged in order to appear as a traveling merchant. A further Bunshin, in order to maintain an element of unpredictability, even when being ambushed, was traveling underground using the Doden, Shinjuzanshu no Jutsu that he had learned from Kakashi. He had provided this Bunshin with extra chakra, in order for him to maintain the jutsu, under the premise that for a similar mission, a ninjutsu specialist would be assigned to the squad. Naruto was made to wait for almost the entire route around the village before Jiraiya struck. It was part of the way through a particularly tight alley, just a few minutes away from the delivery location, when the leading Bunshin raised a hand, simultaneously signaling to the rest to stop and that he had heard something. The original strained his ears, trying to hone in on the low rumbling sound that seemed to be growing in volume. Shit. Behind us. The original span round, and was greeted with the sight of a powerful Fuuden technique, spanning the breadth of the alley, tearing up the ground as it sped towards the group. Bunshin 1, get the cargo to the rooftops. Bunshins 2 and 3, cover them. Naruto barked out his orders as he himself took to the roofs, using the walls of the adjoining buildings to ascend. A glance towards the lead Bunshin told him that he had been successful in avoiding the initial attack. He then checked, below. Fortunately, the Fuuden technique hadn't torn into the ground enough to unearth the final Bunshin, leaving Naruto with an important tactical advantage, should it be needed. Boss, straight ahead. The cry from his clones stirred Naruto from his slight lapse in focus, and he set his sights on Jiraiya, whom to his astonishment, was running up the wall vertically to get to their position, whilst being hinged in order to look like a kumonin. Clones 2 and 3, use Raiten, Kaminari Muchi, try and catch his legs. The two clones acted almost immediately, firing off twisting bolts of electricity towards the enemy. Jiraiya reacted almost immediately, launching himself from the wall he had been climbing to the opposite one, but the chakra whip persisted, forcing him to take to the air in between the two buildings again to avoid the tendrils of lightning. Fuuten, Gukuo no Jutsu. Jiraiya looked up to see the original Naruto in the air, inhaling deeply, and sending several spheres of vicious wind chakra down at him. Reacting at incredible speeds again, he raced through his own hand seals, and used Doten, Dorikageshi without even needing to speak the name of a technique. A stone slab emerged from the building, seemingly using the mortar holding the brickwork of the adjacent building together as its source material, defending Jiraiya from the attack. However, the hinged Sannin was now in freefall. Having had to defend himself mid-leap meant that he was prevented from gaining a foothold on one of the buildings. Raiten, Kaminari Muchi. The Sannin calmly intoned the name of a jutsu that Naruto himself had used, but a few minutes ago, using the lightning whip to grasp the stone slab he had just created, and swinging to the wall of the building Naruto was on, and instantly began moving towards the blonde again. Bunshine 4. Now. Jiraiya looked towards the ground, far too late to be able to do anything about barrage of wind chakra that was just about to impact his chest. Just as the spirals of slicing chakra began to impact Jiraiya, he exploded in a puff of smoke. A cage Bunshine. But that would mean no. The blonde broke out into a desperate run, towards the final destination of his cargo, whilst signaling the fourth Bunshine to follow. Because, during the fighting he had used the opportunity to order the other Bunshines to press ahead, using the combat as cover to slip away. But they had been kept busy by a cage Bunshine, leaving the convoy underprotected, with no knowledge of a second enemy. He soon caught sight of both his Bunshine, and the hinged Jiraiya, with the Bunshine running along the top of the rooftops carrying the merchant, and the Sannin running alongside of them on the wall beneath. The blonde watched as the Sannin ran through some hand seals, too fast to do anything about it. Suddenly, the ground beneath his Bunshine transformed into some kind of swamp, dragging them waist-deep through the roof of the building supporting them. Then, the jutsu stopped, leaving them trapped at the waist in the concrete of the building. Naruto made to move towards the Bunshine, but was nowhere near fast enough as Jiraiya walked up behind the entrapped Bunshine, and casually threw a trio of kunai, implanting them in the ground around his Bunshine. It took Naruto longer than it should have to figure out why Jiraiya had jumped from the roof with the Bunshines on. The kunai had explosive notes on them. Naruto skidded to a halt as they detonated, and his mind's flooded with the memories of his Bunshine. The blonde made to move to where his clones had been, only to be stopped by a voice from behind. I waited until you had made it into an area of the village that is waiting to be developed, so the explosive notes couldn't have harmed anyone. But I Naruto began, shaken by the fact that he had failed to protect what could have been Konoha Ninja, if this was a real-life situation. Don't worry about it for now. We are gonna go to our training area and debrief, figure out what went wrong for you, and how you could have done things differently. You are only a fresh Shanan, Naruto. I'm not expecting you to pull everything off perfectly at the moment. This is a learning exercise, so we can make sure that this doesn't happen in the field. Naruto felt his sensei's hand on his shoulder and nodded. But first, we are gonna have to go back to the shops. I blew up that man's groceries. Naruto sat a few meters ahead of his sensei, waiting for his evaluation of where he had gone wrong in his first attempt at rank missions. He was unusually attentive, considering his knowledge that a lecture from Jiraiya was imminent. However, the memory of firstly, his failure, and also that of what the failure would have meant in a real mission. His comrades, possibly even a friend, would have been killed as a direct result of his decisions. Because of his prisoner, he had grown up alone. Other children were told to keep away from him by their parents and carers, and they listened obediently. He had never harbored any resentment towards the children, nor their parents. He had always assumed that it was simply because of something he, or his parents had done, if he even had parents, of course. Even now, when he had at least some of the answers, he found that he didn't hate the parents or children for their actions. Indeed, having come face to face with the Kyuubi no Kitsune himself, he found that he understood the fears of the village perfectly. However, regardless of this, the damage had been done to Naruto's psyche. His facade was already firmly set into place by the time he had entered the academy, and to everyone within, he was an eternally loud and happy-go-lucky deadlast. Ironically, looking back, it was his method of coping with his own loneliness that destroyed any chance of him making friends during his time there. The children belonging to some of the major clans, he realized, held no ill will to him whatsoever. But despite this, the blonde had found himself to drop his mask. And this inevitably put the others off. Of course there were some that didn't outright dislike him. Narashikamaru seemed eternally curious and did actually speak to him every now and again, and by association, he also spent some time with Akimichi Kuji, who was Shikamaru's best friend. As well as those two, Inuzuka Kiba seemed to appreciate the art of pranking, almost as much as he did. But he would never go as far as to call any of them friends. As a result, a friend was something he had wanted for as long as he could remember. He of course had precious people now. Iruka, Jiraiya, the Sun Daime and even Yuigao, were all utterly precious to him. But they weren't friends as such. They were more like family to him. So to him, the mistake he had made was crushing. Jiraiya observed his student as he became absorbed in his own internal monologue. It was evident that the blonde had taken the implications of his exercise to hear, which was pleasing as the Sannin had initially been worried that Naruto would not take things seriously. Conversely, Jiraiya did not want his student to be too immersed as it were, as that could tear apart Naruto's confidence, which wasn't as high as Naruto would like people to believe. Firstly, I would like to make it clear that you were not expected to succeed in that mission, Naruto. In fact, generally I will be endeavoring to cause you to make mistakes, and sometimes fail as a result. He observed the familiar confused look on Naruto's face, before continuing in order to cut off the inevitable questioning. The reason for this is that it allows you to learn from the mistakes that you do make. If I allowed everything to go to plan for you all the time, it would not punish any errors in your decision-making and planning. Learning from actually seeing the consequences of your mistakes, and making changes to your strategy accordingly, is an infinitely better way to learn than me simply telling you where you went wrong. So with that in mind, what do you think went wrong in the exercise we just did? Naruto didn't need to think before answering. I sent my Bunshine ahead by themselves, whilst I was still fighting your Bunshine. That was indeed the most glaring issue. The fact is, you had no real need to do it. I understand that you wanted to keep the cargo out of the way of the battle, but you had my Bunshine on the ropes. It didn't pose a serious enough threat to the mission. As a result, you were separated from them, and as a result, you could not relay vital information about further danger. However, it is important for you to understand that some situations will call for that kind of action. If the enemy was powerful enough, sending some of your party onwards in the hope of giving them a chance of fulfilling the mission's objective, is the only option. However, it is a last resort option. It is a strategy that acknowledges that those left behind will be defeated, and therefore sacrificed for the good of the mission, as well as the safety of their comrades. Jiraiya saw the mix of understanding and determination on his student's face, and smiled. It was a familiar scene to him. His father had been exactly the same when he failed his first rank, distraught at first, but utterly determined to improve, and ensure that when he did lead a squad into combat, he wouldn't lose any of his comrades. Of course, life doesn't always play fair, and even the best laid plans could be unraveled. But that was not a lesson that could be taught, it could only be learned through experience. Having said that, Jiraiya continued, there wasn't much else wrong with how you worked. The only fault I can find is with the Bunshine you deployed underground. Whilst the idea in itself was pretty ingenious, there is a large risk attached to that particular tactic. During the fight, you allowed me to get between you and your Bunshine, leaving it isolated. Had I allowed myself to raise my game, that would be another teammate dead. Of course, there would be nothing wrong with you using a clone to do that on a real mission. You certainly have the chakra for it, and the Cage Bunshine are, to some extent, expendable. As Jiraiya finished, he fished around in his pocket to produce the map he had used to give Naruto his route. Now, I want to spend a bit of time working through different ways you could have approached that particular mission. That way, you have a variety of different ways of approaching different situations at hand. Hours had passed, and Jiraiya was absolutely delighted with the way his session on tactics with Naruto had gone. Largely, Jiraiya had allowed Naruto to plan independently, and then he would point out faults and problems with what the blonde had come up with, so he could find a way around the problem. The Sannin found himself incredibly surprised with Naruto's intuitive grasp of strategy. He did have a tendency to overlook minor issues, but that was something that could be improved through practice and experience, two things Jiraiya could help Naruto attain. He glanced towards the sky, trying to work out the time from the position of the sun. It had been overcast for a few hours, and it would probably rain in the night, and for someone of lesser ability, judging the position of the sun in such condition would have been a difficult task. Fortunately, Jiraiya had spent most of his later years living under an open sky, traveling between the various informants that made up his spy network. This level of experience meant that he only needed a small glance to see that it was late afternoon. They had been talking for far too long, and Jiraiya needed to speak to the Sun Daime fairly early. Especially if he wanted to get some research in. Okay, listen up Gaki. Naruto immediately turned his attention from the map of Konoha to Jiraiya. We're gonna have to call it quits for today. I have some business I need to attend to. As if arrows Zenin. You're just gonna go and do your research. Jiraiya gave an involuntary flinch at both his nickname, and the fact that the boy was almost spot on with his predictions. For your information, Gaki, I have a meeting with the Hokage. Yeah, for about 5 minutes, and then it's time for some quality research. But first, I need to explain to you how training is going to work under me. I want you here at 6 a.m. every single morning except for Wednesdays and Saturdays. We will spend the first 3 hours working over anything that doesn't involve large amounts of physical work, for example, things such as strategy, ninjutsu theory and eventually, things such as sealing techniques and working on chakra mastery, which I know you've already spoken about with Yuigao. The rest of the day will change depending on the activities of the other Genin cells, which makes it tricky to schedule properly. However, you will always do at least one rank independently, and one with one of the other cells. The rest of the day will be spent on the fun stuff. We will be working on taijutsu and ninjutsu, as well as improving your ability to counter genjutsu. Any questions? What will I be doing on Wednesdays and Saturdays? At this Jiraiya smirked slightly. Well, on those days, you'll be doing weapons training with Yuigao. The next day Naruto finished the relatively short sequence of hand seals and brought his right hand up to his mouth, with his index and middle fingers extended in front of him. He then exhaled heavily, expelling the chakra he had been molding at the back of his throat, and combining it with the chakra gathered at the end of his fingers. Kaden, Kasumi and Duno Jutsu. The result was a light mist billowing out from his mouth, filling the majority of the clearing before him. It wasn't heavy enough to obscure his vision, yet it was still thick enough to be clearly visible. Yes! I finally did it, Naruto exclaimed, the excitement in his voice clearly audible. About time too, Gaki. That's a totally basic technique, the easiest of the ones I want to get you practicing today. Naruto looked up at surprise at this statement. You mean this isn't the only jutsu I'm going to be learning today? Of course not. I don't know if you noticed, but this jutsu isn't particularly useful by itself. I'll be teaching you 3 more jutsu today. One of which you should have down by the time we're finished, the other 2 however, might take you a few days, if we work at them intensely enough. The blonde struggled to contain his excitement at hearing this. No matter how much he tried to be more serious about his shinobi training, the thought of ninjutsu still sent him overboard. However, I first want you to join me up here. The Sannin continued, indicating his position in the tree overlooking the clearing. I'm going to show you exactly how powerful this technique can be. Naruto was up and sitting next to Jiraiya almost instantly, allowing Jiraiya to start weaving his own set of hand signs. Kaden, Kamakai Kaki. Jiraiya fired a miniature version of the Gukakyu no Jutsu directly towards the mist that Naruto had created, and the blonde looked on, curious as to what effect the seemingly tiny fireball could possibly have. Naruto leant forward in fascination as the fireball approached the mist. As the 2 jutsu finally met, the area the pair had been training in was swept by an unbearable wave of heat, as the mist ignited upon contact, transforming the previously placid area of Konoha into a tangible inferno. Naruto, although not being within the blast radius itself, could feel the hairs on his arms cinch from merely the heat created, and despite only seconds passing, he was already beginning to sweat. Amazing! Naruto muttered, as the roaring flames died down, leaving behind the scorched earth as evidence of their existence. Glad you liked it. Jiraiya replied, the smugness generated by the blonde praise emanating from him in waves. But can you tell me why that jutsu combination is entirely useless in a practical combat situation? Naruto was initially dumbstruck by Jiraiya's adamancy that such a powerful attack was useless. However, once he got round to actually think about it, it didn't take him long to see what his sensei was talking about. Firstly, it would be too slow to activate in a fight against another shinobi. They would just try to get out of the mist, considering that it doesn't cover a particularly large area, or at least disguise how much of an area it does cover. Secondly, it would be difficult for you to use the Kaden jutsu without getting caught in the blast radius. It also puts any comrades in the vicinity at risk. That's exactly correct. Jiraiya answered, ever so slightly impressed with the improved analytical skills his student was displaying. It was obvious that he had been studying outside of what he had been required to do to catch up. So why have me learn it then? Naruto called back, almost whining. He had spent a good few hours learning the mist technique, and he'd be damned if it was for nothing. The reason I taught you Katen, Kasumi and Do no Jutsu, and am about to teach you Katen, Kamakai Kaki no Jutsu is threefold. Firstly, Kasumi and Do teaches you to mold Katen chakra from within your lungs, which is what ignites when you use all Katen jutsu. Then, Komaki Kaki will teach you to ignite the chakra using the correct hand seal whilst maintaining enough control so that you do not burn your own mouth. This hand seal is what is missing from the mist technique, preventing it from igniting as it leaves your body. Essentially, this is a far safer and faster way of learning to use Katen chakra, which is notoriously difficult to handle if it is not your natural elemental affinity. This means that you will be able to learn the third of the jutsu I wish to get you started on today, Katen, Gukakyu no Jutsu, relatively easily. Secondly, this combination can be useful in select situations. Due to the fact that Kasumi and Do, providing it is not ignited, can last for a relatively long time, it can be used to set up particularly devastating ambushes, if you can funnel your enemy into the mist. It can also be used to destroy areas containing multiple structures and buildings, should your mission require it. Thirdly, I wanted to give you an example of exactly how powerful combinations of different elemental jutsu can be, which leads you into the final technique I want to get you practicing today, Fuuten, Daitapa. Naruto almost cried out in excitement as he leapt down from the trees, into the barren clearing below, that now looked startlingly out of place amidst the vivid green of Konoha. Jiraiya leapt with him, landing just in front of the boy, so that he was facing him. He formed the ream seal with his hands and created 2 cage bunshine. Okay, I want you to create 2 groups of 5 bunshine, and each group join up with one of mine. One group will work on Komaki Kai, and the other will work on Fuuten, Daitapa. Gukakyu no Jutsu can wait until you have completely learned Komaki Kai. I want the original over with me, we're going to work on your taijutsu. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.